Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome to July's edition of the ANP Monthly live stream here on ANP TV. Again, ANP TV is the variety channel of AN Productions. And boy, howdy, do I think that description fits what this live stream is, because I've got three things that I want to talk about today that have absolutely nothing to do with each other. Other than the fact that they are three things that kind of fit the mantle of who I am as a human being, I think we're talking kaiju stuff today. We're talking something extraordinarily gay after that, and we're concluding with a historical epic. They have nothing to do with each other, but they are things that I've been consuming over the past couple months and have grown kind of obsessed with. And, you know, I kind of just wanted to kind of talk about in some way, shape, and form. So here they are. They're all accumulating with this one strange live stream for the month of July. I do plan on doing more live streams with guests and stuff like that. It's just July has been absolutely crazy. I would have normally had someone like Antonio or Jim or Lucas on to discuss something like Monarch. But their schedules are absolutely crazy. Antonio is exhausted. He just did his awesome dog water runs, which is his speed. I don't know if it's his, but it's certainly Game Controller Network's multi-day live stream where they do nothing but speed runs and raise money for charity. And I know they at least got over $2,000, so awesome on them. And I'm very happy for him. You know, he was doing that, so he's exhausted. Admittedly, I'm also pretty exhausted because I was in the midst of again, the Varan documentary that I just put up, which unfortunately isn't doing as well as I hoped, but oh well. It's still some of the most fun I've had making a video is that one. I'm so autistic when it comes to my aspect ratios. I honestly think that may have been the most autistic thing I have ever written. is that documentary, and I had a blast putting it together. And also in the meanwhile, we're also making a really big documentary on the Battle of Crampton's Gap, which is involving the game War of Rights in many ways. I've also returned to the 4th of Jersey in terms of War of Rights because I said, hey, when they release Cavalry, I will come back, but until then, I'm retiring from the game. And well, now they have Cavalry, and I'm super excited to be in the Cavalry. I am super excited to be here. Godzilla Kiru, glad you could join us. So a lot's been going on. ANP Gaming is now, I have enough stuff there to give me some wiggle room, and hopefully this here will give me some more content for ANP TV. It's just been a lot. A lot of good stuff. My health is getting better finally. No longer covered, head to toe in hives like I was most of the year thus far. So here we go. So we're going to discuss Monarch, Legacy of Monsters Season 2 first. And I normally would have asked Jim, who kind of watched it with me, and Lucas to join so we could discuss this. But in truth, Lucas hasn't watched it. Last I checked, he has not watched it and has seemingly no interest in watching it. And okay, that's fine. And I wound up having to not include Jim here because I ended up watching the final episode. And, we were kind of streaming it together, watching it together. And he just wasn't there for the final episodes. Our schedules never synced, so he never got to see the final episode. I, however, kind of did in passing. So unfortunately, it's just me talking about this. Congratulations on moving to a new house, Godzilla Kiru. Now, the thing that we'll start with Monarch. We'll start with Monarch, then we'll move on to Catch a Firefly by Amy Sanders. We'll discuss that after. And then finally, we'll discuss my appreciation for the movie Khartoum, which was made in 1966. So again, everything will kind of come together. Just opening my failsafe monitor really quick. Cool. All right. So let's jump right into this motherfucker. Because I have a lot of things to say about Monarch Season 2. For those of you who don't know, when I saw Season 1 of this show, I absolutely adored it. I loved... In fact, I loved it so much, it kind of blew me away. I was not expecting to like Season 1 that much at all. And I wound up absolutely adoring it. And I know a lot of fans didn't like it because they didn't like the fact that, hey, they didn't have much for Godzilla in it and things like that, which some of that I think is valid. You come for a show advertising Godzilla and suddenly Godzilla's not really in it. I can understand the criticism. I've come to accept it amongst the fan community, and I can at least understand it. I disagreed because I liked how character-driven the story of Season 1 was. I liked all the twists and turns Season 1 took, and I really liked all of just all the character stuff. I didn't really care for the 3 kids, but I loved Wyatt, and I loved Keiko, and I loved Hiroshi. I thought they were all kind of fascinating characters to look at and study and discuss. Bill Randa, especially. I thought they were all... And what happens to them was really interesting. I loved the Axis Mundi, I guess it was called. I really enjoyed all that stuff. I loved the time dilation stuff, which I've always been kind of a sucker for ever since I saw Interstellar. And I dug it. I really enjoyed it. And I was not expecting it to be this kind of show. And I was so blown away by how much I cared. Was it perfect? No. I'm not saying it was perfect. But I'm saying that I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to end up liking it. And that was a pleasant, pleasant surprise. Now comes Season 2. Season 2. It was okay. Season 2 was okay at best. My overall thoughts is I could barely finish it. That final episode, I was done by that point. I ended up watching that, I think, almost 2 months after, or a full month after it had finally aired. Only then did I watch the final episode. That's how little I cared about it by that point. And a lot of that is because this is what I thought Season 1 was going to be. I thought Season 1 was going to be an awful lot more like what Season 2 is. It's basically a monster of the season. The monster is the problem, and the humans are elected to stop it. They have to solve this problem. That is as bare bones basic of a giant monster plot as you can possibly get. And that wasn't Season 1 at all. There was kind of like this background giant monster thing going on, that bat-looking creature thing, which I liked. I did like it, but that was a background thing, right? It was far more about Wyatt Russell and his trials and tribulations and him coming to terms with things. It was just a very well done characters finding Keiko. Very well done character story. Also full of great performances. Well, this is very plot driven. Very I'll say it was very generic. Very to the point. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's obviously an audience for that kind of story. I mean, Godzilla's been telling that story for now 70 years, for God's sake. Stories like it. But this is just more of what I thought, season 1 was going to be. And so this is more of a traditional story than of Season 1. That being said, I did really enjoy the addition of Kong. Kong's presence in this season, I did like that. I like how that kind of throws a wrench into the trope. Kong kind of throws a wrench into the overall tropes of the whole thing. I do like the fact that it is Kong who ultimately solves the problem. And I do kind of like that, and I like the contrast. And this is something I think the MonsterVerse has done extraordinarily well, is contrasting how Godzilla acts about something to how Kong acts to something, and the differences between the two. And again, the show, I think, does a good job at kind of selling that, despite the fact that really Kong's in it a little bit more than Godzilla. Godzilla basically just has a cameo in this season more than anything else, and granted, it's pretty badass when he shows up, I won't lie. But that's all it is. You know, it's an extended cameo. While he has this constant presence through season 1, he doesn't have that here in season 2. And as I said earlier, season 1 was such a wonderfully character-driven story. Now, the 3 kids, they're fucking basically adults, but you know, the 3 kids drove me crazy. I thought they were unbelievably boring and stupid, and I didn't really care for any of them. Why did I say Wyatt? It's because it's played by Wyatt Russell. Yeah, that's why I said I meant Shaw. Shaw, on the other hand, was not boring. He was unbelievably entertaining. His mystery was unbelievably interesting, and Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell play it very well. And also his relationship with Keiko, I thought, was very well handled, very well done. It was complex without being overly so, without overly getting bogged down with a lot of the relationship details and things like that. And I think Keiko herself was a very interesting character, and I like the twists and turns that her character goes through throughout season 1. Also, I really like the dynamic with the father. I think his name is Hiroshi. I loved how gray he is. You know, he's a decent person, but he did some really bad things. And it's not over the top like Emma Russell, right? Within Godzilla King of the Monsters, where she has absolutely no redeeming qualities whatsoever. She is pure evil. She did not deserve a bit of a redemption arc, the one that she got within Godzilla King of the Monsters. No, Hiroshi does. Hiroshi does deserve a bit of a redeeming arc, and he's kind of getting one. Hiroshi Randa, he's just much more believable, and he's much more of a rounded guy. And I was blown away by all of that. Like, shockingly complex and nuanced character stuff that I just did not expect from what was advertised as a Godzilla series. All of that is waved off in season 2, right? All of the stuff that season 1 ends with just gets kind of hand waved off in the opening of season 2. Like, Shaw's sacrifice at the end of season 1 just gets kind of waved off because literally 5 minutes later, it seems that they rescue him. And that kind of drives me crazy, because it just kind of makes a lot of that tension of that final great episode, that season finale of season 1, just kind of feel for naught. And I hate it when shows do this. You can at least establish, I think, that it took a lot more effort than what was planned to get Shaw back, and that it was longer. There was a longer stretch of time than what was actually shown. Instead of it literally being almost right after the finale of season 1, suddenly Apex is bringing Shaw back. And that bringing Shaw back is ultimately what fucks up Titan X, which is the kaiju of the season. And I must be honest, I officially, I think, lost faith in season 2 as a whole. During the episode where Shaw is talking to himself, where his future self, or his self in the present is talking to himself in the past, while he's still stuck in Axis Mundi. And I get what the writers were trying to do here. I understand it, but they broke their own rules with this sequence. And because they broke their own rules, now this whole dynamic makes no sense at all anymore. Right? It makes no sense within the confines of the universe. It breaks the rules of Axis Mundi. And I'm very aggravated because of it. I hate to say it. And I remember when I was watching it with my friend Jim, I was all over it. I was like, this is awful. Well, I hate this episode because it was irking me so bad, because they could have done something really cool here, but they didn't do it. Which is unfortunately a problem that a lot of time travel or things that deal with time dilation do. And that is to kind of hand wave some of the rules away for the sake of the plot or for the sake of character. And I'm like, because you could do things with your character and with the plot by adhering to those rules that you've established. You just have to be a little bit more creative, and clearly the writers were not. And the big reason why that scene drove me up the wall, or that entire series of scenes drove me up the wall, is because according to the rules that this universe has established, and the between our world and that of Axis Mundi, Shaw should remember talking to himself. Why doesn't he remember talking to himself? Now, you could have really played that up. Now, I understand why Shaw in Axis Mundi, played by Wyatt Russell at this point, wouldn't remember this, wouldn't recognize this. But Shaw, as played by Kurt Russell in the present, would remember it. But he clearly has absolutely no recollection of any of this ever happening. And that is the thing that drives me crazy, because I think it would have been really cool, conceptually, if Shaw realizes in this moment, in the present, so Kurt Russell, I'll just say Kurt Russell realizes in the present, in this moment, that he's kind of fulfilling his own prophecy in a way, right? That he is basically the alpha and omega in terms of his own universe, or his own character. That he remembers this conversation exactly. And so now he has to kind of play that role of trying to keep things on track as to how he remembered it. And there could have been something really cool about that, how it was inevitable that it ultimately would be him that kind of saves the day. Because remember, in that sequence, Wyatt Russell finds Keiko, and he wants to go and save her, he wants to go help her. And it is ultimately Kurt Russell that says, don't do that, you will fuck up the timeline, you will fuck everything up more than it already is, don't go. And because of that, and because of his honesty with himself, he manages to preserve the timeline that we currently have. And I think it would have been such a cool idea had it been where Kurt Russell realizes in this moment that this universe, in terms of the past and interacting with the present and stuff like that, because of Axis Mundi and the rules associated with that, suddenly realize that he's kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. That okay, I think we're back. Are we back? We just lost internet for a little bit. I don't know if we're back now at all. Hoping we are. My internet hicked up. Hicked up. Because of course it did. Still here? Just gonna listen to some playback. Lost internet. Cool. It looks like we are back. Cool. Cool. Interesting. This has been something that's been happening a lot here lately, is that suddenly the internet would just hiccup and... odd. Just coming back, I want to make sure that at least the quality is is decent. Looks like we're doing fine. Quality looks good on my confidence monitor, so hopefully that's okay. Hopefully we're back. Well, let's see. The recording was still going, so we're good there. These will be uploaded after anyways, so it should be okay. But long story short, had the writers stuck with their own rules, had they actually done something about the self-fulfilling prophecy idea that would play very well into Shaw's character, I would have liked it. I would have been on board, and I think it would have been a lot cooler than what we ultimately ended up getting. And unfortunately, that's not what happened, and it did. It drove me absolutely up the wall. Absolutely up the wall. It was driving me crazy. So, unfortunately, a great concept that the writers just totally destroyed. Now, Titan X, on the other hand, Titan X, kind of a generic monster with no real staying quality, looks kind of cool, but it also kind of reminds me of like an Ultraman monster, where it's like, oh, they look really cool and they do some really weird shit, but that's about it. You know, no real overall character to the monster to make them memorable, or to make it memorable, or to make it really have much for staying power within this universe itself. Other than that, it does have a really kind of cool and grody design. I really do like the design. It is really gross, and I applaud the designers. I just wish they they did something with it, and I think that's overall the problem that I have with season 2 of Monarch, and that is there's just so much cool shit that the writers just seemingly did not care about, and it doesn't look like there was a writing crew change from season 1 to season 2, and that's really unfortunate. I think it's really unfortunate. That being said, I do think Titan X reminded me a lot of Jiger from Gamera versus Jiger in many ways. Maybe not in design at all, you know, stuff like that. Ironically, and it would surprise me if they actually did kind of get inspired by Jiger in some ways, because the American title for Gamera versus Jiger was Gamera versus Monster X, and Jiger, while called Jiger in the movie itself or in the dub, is called Monster X in the title. So it could have been inspired by it. It could have been the idea. And that sort of played into the first big twist of season 2, which is that Titan X is actually a female, and not only is a female, but is pregnant. Cool idea. Very cool idea. I also think the parasites that cover her are really gross. Or are those her babies? Or are those parasites? I can't quite remember. But I do like the idea of the symbiotic relationship, though, because if they are separate species, those little tiny like lice things that keep crawling all over her, it does go into that symbiosis theme that is present throughout a lot of the MonsterVerse since Godzilla King of the Monsters that I do like, such as how Godzilla really needs Mothra and Mothra needs Godzilla, stuff like that. Kong needs the Middle Earth, or the Hollow Earth. You know, him and Gia, may she rest in peace, kind of thing. So that would kind of play into that. So I would appreciate it if that's what that was, but I'm not quite sure what it was, and honestly, I can't remember. I really just can't remember. But the fact that Titan X is female, I think, is actually awesome. It's wonderful. It's great. I would love to see some more female kaijus. Really, the only big female kaiju that I can think of that, you know, a lot of other people would think of is Mothra. That's the only other one that I can really think of. And I'm not quite sure about Ultraman. Admittedly, not a really big Ultraman guy. I've seen quite a bit of the original Ultraman. Ultra 7. Seen all of Ultra 7, and I've seen all of Ultraman Jack, but I haven't really watched in completion much of the other stuff. So, there's probably female kaiju within Ultraman, so I apologize, but I just can't remember as of right now. So, sorry about that, but it's Mothra. Mothra is the only other one that I can really think of off the top of my head to such an and to be played up as a female in such an extent as Titan X, or Jiger, I should say. Jiger as well. And I would love to see more, because I think you could play with the fact that you're dealing with a female kaiju as well, you know? And I think that in of itself is just a cool concept. Why not play with it? Why not have more stuff like this? So it was cool to see the Titan X, or that twist reveal that Titan X turns out to be a female, and not only is she female, she's pregnant and trying to lay an egg. I find that kind of interesting. Now, the big problem that I really had with Titan X, and I think it's just because it's not really fleshed out at all, it just kind of manifests itself instead of being foreshadowed more. Kate Randa, she has this psychic connection of sorts to Titan X. Why? Why does she have this connection? What is that connection? Other than thematically, it does kind of fit into that element of legacy. Since Titan X had such a big impact, supposedly, if it had such a big impact on Shaw, Keiko, and Bill that they didn't mention it one bit in season 1. But they, it would play like, oh, now it's this third generation of Shaw-Randa, and they are now connected to these monsters somehow. But it comes out of fucking nowhere. And it isn't even... I'm sorry if it is, and I missed it. I guess that's possible, but I don't think I missed anything here. What is this connection that she has? Why does she have it? Why has she suddenly manifested these psychic powers? That whole thing about her being very upset at the fact that she's now caused all of these problems by the fact that she wanted to get Shaw out of Axis Mundi. That stuff is fine. That stuff is fine. I actually didn't mind any of that. I liked a lot of that. I liked that she needed, especially since she's like, what, 18? She had to kind of step back and think about all of this and try to process it. And grieve, even, over what she has done. Because what she wanted to do was to help Shaw, granted a kind of good thing. But ultimately, because she did that good thing, she kind of like damned the rest kind of deal. And you can do a lot with that. I mean, that's something, for example, and this is probably just because I've been rewatching it lately, Neon Genesis Evangelion wrestles with all the fucking time. Just do that. And I would have been completely on... And I would have been completely on board. But unfortunately, after she decides to come back and work with Keiko and work with Shaw, it's just dropped. It's just fucking dropped. And replaced with this weird psychic connection that she has with Titan X. And I cannot stand it. I cannot stand it. Yes, you're right, Godzilla Kiru. I think she may have very well been in her 20s, because I did forget. She was an actual teacher, if I recall correctly, because of the events within Season 1. Yeah. She wasn't even an assistant teacher. I think she was a teacher. So she'd have to be at least 20 or so. And the only thing that we kind of get out of Kate's psychic connection to Titan X is that, one, she's pregnant, and then two, Titan X, the reason why she's acting up the way she is because of while freeing Shaw, she really threw off the migratory path that Titan X usually takes. And I'm like, this is stuff that you don't need a psychic connection to figure out. In fact, that would have given the Monarch team something to do other than just kind of chase the monsters. They could have been the ones to figure out, oh, she's pregnant. And, oh, her path has been thrown off. And then relayed that information to Shaw and the party, you know, and the gang. It would have given them something to do other than just kind of take up space, unfortunately. Which, again, is too bad because I really like that guy. I really like that guy. It did have a Gamera and Asagi element to it. You're right, it did. And I wish, again, the writers could have really played that up. Could have really played that up, and they really didn't. And there's really no excuse for it either, because in Gamera, you just can do it over the course of a movie, right? A 90-minute movie. This was a 10-episode series. So you have roughly 10 hours to tell this story. That's plenty of time to establish this and to figure it out, and the writers didn't do it. And so I summarize that whole ordeal with this. You have a bare, basic plot with razor-thin character stuff, and that is the best we have here with Season 2. Is that. And I don't like it. I don't like it. Now, I swear, I'm just shitting all over this, and I think I'm going to continue to shit all over Season 2, unfortunately, as I go along. But there is stuff that I do really like, because as I said in the beginning, it's okay. The season was okay. I didn't hate it. But there are stuff, and I'm going to praise it later on. And I feel kind of bad here, because I don't like talking about things that I don't like. It's just, to me, a waste of energy. I like discussing things that I do like. Things that bring me joy. Things that make me happy. Things I find cool. Right? Not stuff that drives me up the wall. And while Godzilla vs. Kong, sorry, excuse me. Monarch Season 2 didn't drive me up the wall by any stretch of the imagination. It certainly left me bored and wishing it was more than what it was. Which is not what I had with Season 1 at all. So, I'll say that. Now, unlike Season 1, where character kind of took precedence over the plot ultimately, which again was something I was not expecting, even remotely, for something American Godzilla related, right? Season 2 plot takes precedence over the legacy element of the previous season. I loved that theme of legacy within Season 1. Not only because of the title, right, but also just made sense in terms of the universe itself. That we are now dealing with a multi-generational problem here. And that the sins of the father will ultimately affect the sins of the son kind of deal. And the interconnection between those generations. That's stuff. That's stuff that I explore within my Godzilla series. That's stuff I just like exploring in general. And that's one reason why I ate Season 1 up. Like it was the best candy ever. And I adored Season 1 so much. In Season 2, that theme of legacy really only is present with one element. And it's the fact that 3 generations are now working together to solve the Titan X problem. That's what that theme has devolved to by this point. I'm sorry. I'm severely disappointed in that. Again, that's as razor bare bones as a plot can get, or as a theme can get. So I do have a bit of a problem with that. But to kind of end this discussion on Titan X, I will say this, and I really did enjoy this a lot, actually. That whole flashback sequence, right? That whole flashback bit within that small town in South America, and them seeing Titan X, and the whole culture kind of built around the fact that Titan X is the thing. Honestly, I think that's my favorite episode of the season, was that whole bit, because I loved that episode. And the reason why I loved that episode is because I got what the filmmakers were trying to do. It was very H.P. Lovecraft inspired. Not so much in the cosmic horror realm, right? But certainly inspired by Shadow over Innsmouth. And I love my H.P. Lovecraft. I love H.P. Lovecraft like there's no tomorrow. One of my favorite authors, my favorite horror author, period. Racism aside. And I dug it. I liked the creepiness of it. I liked the mystery behind it. I liked our characters getting drugged. I liked the effect that Titan X has had on this village. And I wanted to learn more. And I think that was the thing that why I liked it so much, is not only was it creepy and paying homage to, you know, one of my favorite authors, but it was just unbelievably interesting. And I wanted to learn more about it. Also, to praise something else that I really liked is that episode 19. Episode 19 is very good. The second to last episode, the penultimate episode, I should say. If that one revealing Titan X in that village isn't my favorite, then the penultimate episode of the season is. The scene where Shaw and Keiko make that big discovery and find Bill's wedding vows, you know, within all of those probes, all accumulating on Skull Island itself. That is where the center of where everything is, and what he's been striving to find so much. I loved that. And it actually had kind of this very sweet, cutesy kind of message to it that really ultimately made Bill my favorite character in all of this, if not my favorite character in the entire Monsterverse. And it made me kind of wish that he had a bigger presence within Season 2 than he does. He's more kind of an absent character, and because he's gone, we feel his presence everywhere without him actually being there. So I think that kind of makes up for that element. I do like characters where that happens an awful lot. I do like that kind of stuff where they're not actually physically there, but their presence is felt a lot. Hell, Godzilla fits that a lot, you know. But I would genuinely like to see what happens within this season and his story of reaching Skull Island eventually and figuring everything out, the story of Kong Skull Island. I would love to see a story told from his point of view. Considering, you know, he was cheated on, you know. Freaking Russell and Keiko did have sex with each other. They did hook up, despite the fact that Keiko was with Bill. You know, he was kind of thrown to the curb when it came to that. Even though Keiko ultimately tried to choose Bill, she ultimately gets sucked into Axis Mundi with Shaw. And so what we think, it's a great example of what we think is going to happen versus what actually happens. Because what we think is what Hiroshi thinks, his quote-unquote son. And that is, he just became utterly obsessed with finding these portals. He became utterly obsessed, and he abandoned his child because of it. He was so obsessed he lost sight of his own family. When in reality, that was the whole reason, his family was the whole reason why he did what he did. as revealed within the penultimate episode of season 2. And I love that. I love that, and I would love them to bring back John Goodman. Weight loss aside, I would love to see him reprise his role as Bill, and I want to see his point of view of what happens. I like him that much. Who knows? Maybe they'd ruin him too. I don't know, but we'll find out. By the way, these red, white, and blue raspberry, I guess, monsters are delicious. I am not sponsored. I just am shocked at how much I love this monster. I am just shocked. Anyways, back to Monarch, Legacy of Monsters. We still live? It looks like we are still live. So, that relationship that he has with Keiko being completely and utterly destroyed by her relationship with Shaw. I do like the fact that Bill genuinely loves Keiko, and only Keiko. And that ultimately his character is a nerd with good intentions. He's nice, he's sweet, he's a bit autistic. In fact, that could be what he has and why he acts the way he does. It certainly would explain a lot of it. And that he genuinely loves Keiko. I do really like that. And he has a hard time expressing it, as we saw in Season 1 and as we saw a bit within Season 2. I do like that stuff. In some ways, that kind of reminds me of Serizawa, where Serizawa is very... Dr. Serizawa of the original Godzilla, not of Ken Watanabe's version. But Dr. Serizawa and Emiko, where Serizawa loves Emiko, clearly, adores her. But he has such a hard time expressing it because of who he is. And ultimately, that kind of coldness that Serizawa has ultimately is what drives Emiko into the arms of Ogata. And I think that kind of is what happens with Keiko and Bill, is that ultimately Shaw is a much more energetic, emotional, physically fit even person, and ultimately Keiko is kind of attracted to that. She gets the attention she desperately wants that Bill tries to show her, but has a hard time expressing it. She gets it with Shaw. And I do like that dynamic. I do like the dynamic that it's set, that they know they fucked up, or that Bill, that Keiko and Shaw, they know that they kind of fucked up. They shouldn't have done that. Keiko actively tries to end it. And that Shaw accepts that. I like it. I'm not saying they're good people. You know, they still cheated. She still cheated on Bill. But I think that is a very mature thing that the writers chose to do. And that's, again, one of the reasons why I like Season 1 so much, and that was one of the elements that I really liked here in Season 2. Was that element. And so when Bill finds out, it's a bit of a twist for him, because to this point, he always thought that Hiroshi was his kid. But then he discovers that letter from Shaw, or that letter that Keiko wrote to Shaw. And so it's implied that Hiroshi is not actually Bill's kid, it's Shaw's kid. It's implied. I don't know if it's actually outright stated, but it's certainly implied. And if it's actually not Bill's kid, that actually explains why he left Hiroshi in the care of someone else. It's not his kid. And in fact, that's what Hiroshi thinks. And it also explains his obsession with bringing Keiko and Wyatt home to reunite with Hiroshi. And while Hiroshi, on the other hand, and this is kind of our POV until episode 19, Hiroshi thinks Bill just abandoned him. When in reality, Bill is trying to do everything in his power to bring Keiko and Shaw home to be with their son. To reunite this family. And I love that. I love that. And I've always liked character dynamics that kind of explored that. And certainly this isn't the deepest thing, and certainly... I don't understand where you're getting that from, Godzilla Kiru. You're probably right, saying that Hiroshi isn't either of their kid. He was born prior to her meeting the two men. I don't know when that happens. I can't remember that at all. It shows how little I cared. Which, if that's the case, then that's even... I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Ugh. If that's true, then that kind of throws everything that I was just talking about out the window, and I don't like it. I don't like it. God damn it. I'm sick of writers taking middle of the road. Pick a direction and stick to it. Show some integrity, damn it. Show some integrity with your writing. Maybe you actually have something to say. So, because if that's the case, that ruins the next bit that I was about to talk about. I'm not going to talk about it. Something I have always been a fan of in my realms of fiction, especially in fantastic universes such as the Monsterverse, are my underground organizations. I've talked about this a lot when it comes to the Monsterverse and stuff that I kind of enjoy. You know, Godzilla Kiru, I don't care. I just don't care anymore. Honestly, your comment there, talking about how Hiroshi isn't either of their kid, honestly kind of dejects me from this whole series even more. It really does deject me. I don't like that decision. It should have been either Shaw or Bill's kid. It should have. Would have played into the element of legacy even more. But it's not. And if that's the case, why isn't Hiroshi pissed at Keiko? He's definitely pissed at Bill. Well, you'd think Hiroshi would actually not be pissed at Bill, but would be pissed at Keiko for choosing to get sucked into the Hollow Earth, or, sorry, Axis Mundi, over him. Whatever. I don't fucking care anymore. I really don't. That really just dejected me. Because that goes against the whole theme of the fucking show. That decision. That's aggravating. Anyways. Monarch and Apex and whatever the hell Isabel is doing. Because Isabel is not part of Apex, but she is. It's like a splinter group from Apex, so it's an underground organization within an underground organization, I guess. I actually wish what they did with Isabel... I honestly would have just had Isabel just working for Apex. I wouldn't have had her be her own splinter group. I wouldn't have had any of that. Just have her be a part of Apex. There's just too many elements to be properly fleshed out. For that to be properly fleshed out, which they could have had it just been a part of Apex, but it's not. She clearly says this is something else. It's associated with Apex, but it's not Apex. So I wish they fleshed that out a little bit more, but they didn't. So I wish they just kept it Apex, completely Apex. Make it simple, stupid in terms of that. But I love all this infighting between Monarch and Apex. I loved that. I loved the twist that Titan X actually wasn't about to make landfall, and it was a deliberate glitch planted by Apex for Monarch to take the bait of. And I loved that. I absolutely did enjoy that. The facility where they're also studying creatures from the Hollow Earth. I loved all of that. I loved the infiltration stuff. I mean, it was a little cheesy, don't get me wrong, but I loved a lot of the world building we get within that sequence. And I think that's the key, is you kind of see, so this is what they're doing behind the scenes. This is what Apex is trying to accomplish. This is what Apex is interested in. We don't quite know what their end goal is yet. But we know that this is a direction in which they are going. And I kind of liked all of that. There is a lot of world building within that sequence itself. Let's see. And I do like that there's parallels here. There's parallels between what Apex is doing and what Monarch wants to do and is also doing. The difference is kind of fascinating in the terms that this really reminds me a lot of the SCP Foundation. The SCP Foundation is Monarch, while the Global Occult Coalition, or Chaos Insurgency, kind of a mixture of the two, is Apex. I'm actually curious if the writers were inspired by that at all, because it's so similar. It's so similar. It's these two organizations that are kind of fighting for control over this whole thing with the giant monsters and the Hollow Earth and Axis Mundi and stuff of that nature, and I enjoy it. I enjoy all of that stuff. Because right now it kind of looks like Monarch is kind of wants to protect people by bringing awareness to the kaiju and learning about living with them instead of trying to kill them, while Apex seems to have this guise that they seem to have the guise of that they want this kind of symbiosis, but really want to use the kaiju to further their ultimate goal. What their ultimate goal is, I'm not quite sure. I know it has something to do with Mechagodzilla because of Godzilla vs. Kong, but I don't even think that's the whole picture. And I loved all of that. I even loved the mystery of what the hell is Apex even trying to do? What is their end goal? What is their mission statement? Not the one that they have up on placards, but in terms of what their mission is. What is it? And I do enjoy that. I enjoy that quite a bit. I will... This did make me laugh the more I thought about this. I think it was Jim who actually brought it up. I didn't notice it until Jim brought it up. But it is kind of stupid that Monarch has only one ship to monitor Titan X. Shouldn't it have been like a whole fleet? Or at least the United States Navy helping out Monarch? Since Monarch is, you know, a part of the United States government. Godzilla Kiru, I agree with you. I would love to see more done with Apex. I would love to see more done with Monarch as well. I would love there to be a freaking season devoted to just this kind of Cold War that's going on between the two of them. I would be all over that. There's so much you can do with this universe that's really cool. Not just dumb and stupid that we're getting with the movies. You can really kind of get into the nitty-gritties of this universe with this show. And they did a lot of that with Season 1. Season 1 had a lot of that. And that's some of the stuff that I really enjoyed about Season 1. Not so with Season 2. So, like, pre-Godzilla 2014 Monarch, I could see them only having one ship chasing Titan X or monitoring Titan X. But certainly not post-Godzilla. Post-Godzilla, I think in reality they would have had 3, 4, 5, at least 5 ships monitoring this thing. But no, because of the sake of the plot, we only need one ship with one computer. It would have been really cool had Apex actually infiltrated more than just Monarch and tricked everybody into thinking that Titan X was heading that way, when in reality Titan X wasn't there at all. That would have been really cool. But I do applaud this season for making Apex a more interesting idea than just a bad company doing bad things. You know, it's a little more complicated than that, and I appreciate the season for doing it. Because in Godzilla vs. Kong, let's face it, that's exactly what it is. It's the bad, greedy corporation doing bad, greedy corporation-y things. Insert Team America World Police quote here. And this show does some stuff with it to make Apex not only a more believable organization, but also a more nuanced one, and certainly a more interesting one. There's a mystery behind it all, and I want to know what it is. What is their ultimate goal? What is it exactly that they want? You know, it's a good mystery. It's a good mystery, and also I'm curious who runs it. Who runs Apex? We know it's that guy, from Godzilla vs. Kong, right? But it can't just be him, right? You mean to tell me that after Godzilla vs. Kong, Apex just died? I don't think so. I don't think so. And I would love it if they played that up a little bit more. Speaking of who the hell's running Apex, I would really appreciate it if they established a COC for Monarch as well. What's their hierarchy like? Because there's so much we just don't know. And I would like to know, because I'm into that shit. So let's talk about Godzilla's cameo. Godzilla wanting to kill Titan X, to me, made absolutely perfect sense because of who he is within the MonsterVerse. I think that made perfect sense. Godzilla's a very territorial creature. He just says, nah, I'm going to kill everybody and everything that threatens my domain. And he senses that Titan X is kind of threatening his domain. He's going to kill her. I like that. It made perfect sense. In fact, that entire scene, that fight scene, I loved. I loved all of it. It's this giant, wonderful action piece that I adored. You got Godzilla versus Titan X. You have Monarch trying to stop Isabel's little faction from stealing the Titan X egg. And then you've got Isabel trying to steal Titan X's egg. And on top of that, you also have that sort of moral battle between, what's his name? The guy. And Isabel. And Kate. It was him and Kate. What's the name? Hold on, let me take a look. Is it Ken? Kentaro? Yeah, it's Kentaro. You have that happening as well. So you have all of these elements kind of happening all simultaneously during that action sequence, and I love that shit. I love that stuff. And it was a very entertaining fight scene because of it. I was satiated by it. Apparently a lot of people weren't, but I was. I thought it was just fine. And of course, Kong would be the one to understand that Titan X really does mean no harm. Of course it would be Kong. Kong is that kind of character within the MonsterVerse, and it fits perfectly in line with him. I mean, he's a brawler, sure. We certainly see him being a brawler, and he's certainly territorial, just like Godzilla. But it's also established that Kong certainly has more of a heart than Godzilla does. Godzilla doesn't really have a connection to humanity. Kong does. In the very least, he has that because of Gia. Again, may the actress rest in peace. That was very sad. Now, Kong might be angry because the humans have fucked with the forces of nature, quote-unquote. But not so much because there's another monster on the loose. It has way more to do with, you're fucking with nature. You're fucking with the order of nature, I should say. And Kong would show mercy. Once he understood this. Or once he understood what Titan X was meaning to do. He would show mercy, while Godzilla absolutely would not. He would not give a shit whatsoever. And again, that kind of plays into the idea that I've talked about many, many, many times when it comes to Godzilla and Kong and their dynamic. We love understanding Kong. We like understanding him. We like feeling sympathy for Kong in many ways and understanding him. We love being afraid of Godzilla. And say what you will about the MonsterVerse, as silly as it is, they play that up. And I appreciate them playing that up like mad. We're almost done here. The Hollow Earth versus Axis Mundi is the next bit I kind of wish to talk about. It's really not a bad idea. I do like the idea that there's multiple like inner universes that are all kind of interconnected in some way, and all of it being kind of beyond our comprehension. Like, the more we try to understand it, only the more questions we end up getting raised, and it ends up being a spiral, and it kind of drives you mad. That's very cosmic horror. That's very cosmic horror, and, you know, I'm a big fan of cosmic horror. So I do like it. I do like that Axis Mundi is something indeed different than Hollow Earth. I do like it that they're two different domains. And I hope they kind of play that up a little bit more. Because to me, Axis Mundi kind of feels like a purgatory. Feels like purgatory, while the Hollow Earth feels like heaven and hell kind of deal. And the Axis Mundi is just like middle ground where time, there's the weird time dilation thing, but where time has no meaning kind of deal, quote unquote. And I do like that. I do like that, and I hope they play that up a little bit. So, about time I fucking wrapped up talking about Monarch, huh? Been talking about it for over an hour now. Overall thoughts, it's okay at best. Season 2 is okay at best. Season 1 was phenomenal. Season 2 is what I thought Season 1 was going to be. Certainly more generic, certainly more general, certainly less creative. Still okay. It was just okay at best. And when Season 3 comes out, I'll enjoy Season 3, if there's going to be a Season 3. I'll enjoy it. I'll certainly be tuning in and getting Apple Plus TV again, or whatever the hell you want to call it. Which, by the way, is the worst streaming service I've ever had to deal with. But I'll certainly be watching it. I'll certainly be tuning in and seeing where it goes. So, that's going to conclude my conversation about Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, Season 2. I'm going to be talking about something quite a bit different next. I'm going to be talking about a book that is a little bit gay. So you can tune in for that and kind of joke around with me and kind of read about that and stuff like that. But we'll be talking about that. We'll be right back. I'm going to get myself a drink. Gonna kind of relax just for a little bit, but we will be right back. Thanks for tuning in. We interrupt your normal broadcast to bring you this brief message. ANP is proud to have become a History Fix affiliate. History Fix is a streaming service for history nerds like you and me. This includes some of our own productions, such as the uncut and uncensored version of our documentary on the Battle at Remagen, along with our short documentary breaking down the Boston Massacre moment by moment. So head on over using either the link on your screen right now, or by scanning the QR code, and save 30% off the annual subscription price by using the promo code 30% off. Thank you, and let's keep history alive. Well, hello there, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Wow, we're about to go through a change in topic. Just a little bit. Just a little bit of a change in topic. I'm actually a little nervous to talk about this, because I haven't actually never really gone in depth before talking about something, you know, something of this nature, and that is, you know, an MM book, or an M4M book, I guess. A male romance book. It's gay. I've never actually done this before. I have talked about it before, but not having something just solely dedicated to it. I talked about Heated Rivalry, the show, with Antonio. and the books. I have all the Game Changer books, by the way, which I'll bring that up here as well. But I read something last month. I read it very much, and I wanted to talk about it because I have a lot to say about this stupid book. It's not stupid. I don't mean to insult it by any means, but this book that I'm about to talk about was highly recommended on Reddit, on the romance novel Reddit subreddit. Butterboy, you're just in time. You're just in time for me to talk about pencils touching each other. You are just in time, my friend. I'm actually kind of embarrassed to talk about it. Especially the fact, I'm not really embarrassed of the fact that what I'm talking about has to do with homosexuality or anything like that. I'm more just embarrassed. Look at this cover. That is ridiculous of a cover. I'm going to say that right now. I hate these model covers that these books tend to have. I hate it where it's nothing but like close up on their abs and shit like that. And it's always just the most generic model face you could possibly imagine. And it is ridiculous. And I absolutely hate that cover. It deserves better than that cover. And that's one of the things that I think the Game Changer books managed to get, is that their original covers were the most horrid things I've ever seen. They are this cover to a T. This one right here. They're that to a T. But now there's a different one. They have different covers now. And they're a little more stylized. They're a little more artistic in nature. And they actually fit the tone of the book in which they tell. This thing doesn't fit the tone of the book at all. And I can't stand that cover. Oh, yeah, it's awful. That cover is terrible. It's terrible. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about To Catch a Firefly by Emmy Sanders. Again, highly recommended. In fact, I had people even calling it one of the best romance novels they had ever read. So, and for the record, that wasn't just a couple of people. I'm sorry. It was several people. And I was like, oh, shit. Well, I'm kind of a sucker for these books. Kind of. Yeah, it's way too flamboyant. It's way too flamboyant. It doesn't even fit. This is one of the characters. I believe that person that is depicting is the character Lucky within the book. But it just doesn't fit. It does not fit the tone of the book at all. And that's what I hate about a lot of these book covers, is that they just don't fit the book. And that's one of the things that I love about the Game Changer book covers now, is that they're painted, cartoonish kind of style actually fits what happens in the books. And I appreciate that. This thing, the fuck? All right, I don't want to spend all my times talking about that absolutely ridiculous cover. But you know, I do. I'll admit it. I'm a sucker, and to the point that I've written a couple. I'm a sucker for romances. I am. I'm a sucker for them. I do like a good romance story. I do like a good romantic story. I do like a good story that gives me those sort of warm butterflies inside kind of deal. I am a bit of a sucker for them. And, you know, sometimes it's just really good to read something kind of sappy, something kind of angsty, you know, something that kind of fits that mold. Because a lot of what I read is fiction. Not fiction, sorry. A lot of what I read is historical fiction and nonfiction. I mean, look at my case behind me, for example. That's a lot. All of that stuff over there I have read. And so it's sometimes good to kind of go to something like this, because I don't want to say something like this is mindless. It certainly isn't. There are some really thought-provoking ideas in this. But it is kind of good to just kind of be able to turn off your brain and just enjoy something really, really simple. And that's what this is. This is pretty goddamn simple. This is the first book by Emmy Sanders that I have ever read. I don't really follow any romance novel writers other than Rachel Reed. I don't really follow any of the others. Probably won't be my last because I did enjoy this book enough that says, I think she's a clever writer. And I enjoyed her writing style. And again, this is highly recommended on Reddit. Highly recommended. It's one of the best books ever written. And quite frankly, from all the reviews and the summaries that I saw, I liked what I was reading. It piqued my interest, and we'll get into what the story is in just a little bit. It intrigued me enough that I said, fine, I'll go out and I'll get it. And admittedly, I didn't read it. I read the audiobook, and the audiobook was fantastic. It was really fantastic. And it is kind of it's a typical story of friends to lovers. It's a classic story. Classic story. It's a typical story of friends to lovers, and the two characters are Lucky and Ellis. You have Ellis, who is this quiet, very clearly autistic man who cares for his mother, who has been diagnosed with MS. I think it's MS. I'm not entirely sure. I can't remember off the top of my head. And he's very content with living on this small town farmland home in the middle of Tornado Alley. He's very content with it. He's happy there. And then you have another character named Lucky. And Lucky, who is a more carefree guy who likes to travel the world and is a successful photographer for, I think, National Geographic. Or a non-copyrighted version of National Geographic. This is not what I was expecting. And I have lots of opinions on it. I have so many opinions on it, I actually wanted to talk about this. I have to talk about this. It's almost kind of cathartic in a way. Because I overall agree with the general consensus of this book. And that is the first half is significantly better than the second half. There is a very, very clear divide between the first half of the book and the second half. And the first half of the book is Ellis and Lucky circling each other until they meet, or until they finally get together. And then the second half of the book is them together. And it is all done through this theme that I like. And again, I love through themes. I love that. Again, my fiction is often full of them. Full of these kind of through currents that are themes. In this case, the book opens with Ellis catching a firefly. He puts it in a jar. And he can't believe he did it, because catching a firefly is absolutely hard to do. But unfortunately, I think he forgot to put air holes in the jar, so when he comes out there the next day, he discovers that firefly is dead, because he caught this firefly. And throughout the story, you start realizing through Ellis's POV that he looks at his friend Lucky like a firefly. First off, Lucky is described as a firefly. He has very blonde hair, long flowing blonde hair. He's very elegant. He moves a lot. He's very quick. He's kind of almost reminds me of like he has ADHD or something like that, just because he likes to move around a lot. He's very curious. He loves to bounce from place to place. And Ellis feels unbelievably selfish that he wants to keep his best friend, because they're best friends. He wants to keep his best friend in his hometown, so that way they can continue being friends. But yet, if he does that, he knows it will kill Lucky. Lucky wants to explore the world. He wants to explore what the world has to offer. He doesn't like being trapped in the small town. He likes coming back to the small town. He likes having it as his home, but he wants to explore the world. So Ellis gets in his head that he's kind of that Lucky's like a firefly. And that is, if he captures Lucky and keeps him here in the small town, it will kill Ellis. It will ruin their friendship. It will ultimately destroy their friendship. The best thing he can do is let Lucky go and explore the world. And that ultimately is what leads to a lot of the angst with his story in terms of his feelings for Lucky, which I think is a nice little touch. I do kind of like that, and I like Ellis's view of that, especially considering the fact that Ellis very clearly has a touch of the tism. Goes nonverbal constantly, rarely talks, especially if he gets a little emotionally overwhelmed. He does not talk. He just completely goes silent. And one reason why he gravitates towards Lucky so much is because even when he gets silent and he finds words very hard to he can think them just fine, but he has a hard time articulating what his thoughts are into words. Which is why he writes all of these emails expressing himself. I don't know why he writes them in emails. I would have just had it be a diary or some kind, or a journal of some kind. But the only way Ellis can really express how he feels towards Lucky without revealing everything to Lucky is he writes all of these emails, and he's able to put to words everything that he's been wanting to say, but he can't in reality because that's how his brain works. His brain has a hard time. He has a hard time articulating his words. And it is kind of beautiful that one of the things that Lucky does to kind of push Ellis forward is that because he's always away in some other country or somewhere far away within the United States itself, they talk on the phone a lot. And of course, Lucky pushes Ellis to talk more. And it kind of allows Ellis to grow. He still doesn't talk very much, but he at least starts talking. He's not completely silent like he is in the beginning of the novel. By the time they've grown up a little bit, and by the time Lucky is exploring the world, they've matured a little bit, and Ellis is at least now talking, when before he wasn't talking at all. And that's because of Ellis. And I do like that. I actually think that's all handled extraordinarily well in this book. Without outright saying it, by the way. Except one time, and I'm going to get to that a little later. All of this is just inferenced, right? It's never outright stated by Ellis or anyone that, oh, he's special ed, you know, he's kind of retarded, kind of deal, you know. It's never outright stated, and I actually think that's a lot better than actually stating it outright. You know, she doesn't treat us like idiots. We get it. We understand. We get the nuance. We get the context. We get it. We're not idiots. It's ruined with one scene, unfortunately, and that scene could have easily had been cut. But we'll get into that a little later. I promise. Jesus. Where are we? Am I still live? Yeah, it looks like we're still live. Cool. All right. So one of the things that actually jumps out with this book that I actually kind of, again, something that I really like about it, is its role reversal. It's not what I thought it was going to be at all. I actually thought Ellis would be the submissive partner in this whole thing, while Lucky be the dominant. Personality-wise, certainly Lucky is a little more dominant than Ellis in terms of he knows what he wants to do, and he's running around all over the place, and he's got a job, and he wants to do that. But Ellis does too. Ellis likes working where he does. He's perfectly happy doing that while taking care of his mother, and he's perfectly happy doing his little artistic treasured things and stuff like that. He's perfectly fine with that. And what's interesting is I thought sexually it was going to be Lucky was the dominant partner, the top, if you want me to be a little more crass about it. And I thought Lucky and I thought Ellis was going to be the submissive partner. No, it's the other way around. Fucking Ellis has that shit figured out, I'll tell you that. He is the top of the century according to Lucky within this. And actually I kind of enjoyed it. I didn't think I wasn't expecting it to go that direction, and it did. And I liked it. It subverted my expectations without it being absolutely ridiculous. Um, but that being said, there are many tropes within this that I do not like. In fact, there's a whole list of tropes that I have written down elsewhere of tropes within novels or just romance novels in general that I just don't like, and this book has. A big one being the misunderstood artist. I hate that trope. I hate that trope to no end. It is one of my least favorite tropes of all time. Yes, I am still here, Butterboy. Complaining about the gay stuff. You have a name like Butterboy. Sorry to break it to you, buddy, but you might want to change that name. So the misunderstood artist I do not like, and that's certainly Lucky to a T. He's a bit of the misunderstood photographer. Meanwhile, also, Ellis is a bit of an artist, too. He likes to shatter glass and then melt it down and make shapes and stuff like that. He kind of sells it at the local market. And that's how he makes some cash behind the scenes and stuff like that. I don't really mind it so much with Ellis. It's definitely more the stuff with Lucky that I don't really like. But there's tons of tropes that I just cannot stand. Or, not that I can't stand them, but they're just overused ridiculously. The misunderstandings, the constant dancing around it when it's so obvious that they like each other romantically. I mean, fucking obvious that they like each other romantically, and yet they just constantly skip over each other. I'm like, God damn, do these guys have a brain cell? Do these characters have a single brain cell? It's so obvious that this is what it is. It's to the point that the novel that I'm currently working on, I deliberately said, here are all the tropes that I can't stand, or that are very common within these, and I'm not going to do a single one of them. And this is full of those. It is. It's full of those, and you just kind of gotta... Didn't need it. But, that being said, and I just kind of dissed Lucky again for being kind of the misunderstood artist. I actually relate to him a lot. I do relate to his character quite a bit. More than I kind of like admitting. And not so much of the fact that he is the artist, but rather that he is an unbelievably restless man. He likes exploring, and so am I. I'm a very restless human being. I like changing things up. Look, I've got a new set, for example. I love changing things up. I get restless, and especially when I start feeling a little too comfortable, I get a little restless, and I want to go and go explore, either via my mind by consuming a new topic of some kind, or traveling to a new place to explore the history around there or a history location, seeing things, touching things, experiencing things. In that sense, I relate to Lucky quite a bit, because that's essentially what he is. And again, this might be a little bit too personal, I'm not quite sure, but it's certainly an element when it comes to Lucky. Often what happens is, especially when I was a little younger, I would often fill this kind of emptiness that I had going to these places and exploring stuff. I would often fill that void with hookups, which is something that this book talks about and deals with. You sort of kind of fill that empty void with hookups, and all the while you're kind of yearning for that one guy that you love. That I don't really want to say your knight in shining armor, but something along those lines. You're looking for this one man in which you have high expectations for. You're keeping the bar high very deliberately because you want that person to be the person, your end-all be-all. And that is what Lucky has. Lucky is a hornball when he's on his own. Not as much as that random guy that he's with or his boss that he's with or whatever the fuck, but he's a bit of a hornball. And that's because he's built in his head this idea of who the perfect partner is. Without him connecting the dots that man is Ellis. And that's why he actually hasn't found anybody. It's not so much because he hasn't been looking. It's because the person that he's been idolizing as or imagining being his knight in shining armor is already there. He's found him already. And I love the scene in the book where he realizes this. It's actually brilliantly written without it being overly drawn out, overly explained, overly wordy. And that's the stuff that I applaud in this book, is stuff like that. Now, that being said, despite me, relating to Lucky in that capacity, Ellis is a phenomenal character as well. And I honestly respect his character more than I respect Lucky. And that respect is kind of a key word. While I don't really care that he's also kind of a tortured artist, he's more of a guy that creates stuff to express himself, since he has such a hard time vocalizing thing, more than he is a tortured inner artist like Lucky. But I like his POV a little bit more than I like Lucky's. Because it's so different to Lucky. It's so different. It's so, in terms of even the writing style, it is so radically different and so clearly told via a neurodivergent POV. And I think that's beautiful. It is so beautifully done. It's so beautifully handled. And I can't really, because if you want to read it, I recommend that you read it, so I can't really go into everything about it. But there's things that he writes about in his sections of the story that we as the audience can pick up on, that we understand that, oh, this is what's actually happening, this is what they're actually doing. But because his brain doesn't work like that, I mean, he was just born that way, his brain isn't wired like that, he doesn't see it. He can't connect the dots. It needs to be told to him for him to see it. And that's very difficult to write. And I think Emmy Sanders did a very good job with that. An excellent job with that. And it makes his parts of the story a little more engaging, in my opinion. Because you have to listen to it. You have to listen to pick up on what he's missing. And that's cool. That made this book pretty engaging for me. That being said, this book, it's written from both of their POVs, right? So it would be like one chapter is being told from Ellis, and then the next chapter would be told from Lucky. And they're both written in first person. I am not a fan of first person. If you're going to do a story where you have a character, right, and you're telling that character's story, I like third person limited. In fact, I write third person limited quite a bit, where it's entirely from one character's point of view, with some minor exceptions, but it's written in third person. And the reason why is because I have a very hard time buying first person as a writing medium. Not so much that it exists. Of course it exists, and it's very popular, especially with younger adults, or YA, the YA audience. They love their first person for some reason. And I think that's just because first person might be a little bit more personal, and that's one reason why a lot of authors choose it. While third person limited, despite it being written very similarly to first person, because you're still using their name and not I, that kind of puts a distance between the reader and the character. Well, with first person, you don't have that distance. That being said, the reason why I don't buy it is because first person implies that it's happened, and it's like a character is recalling what has happened. And you mean to tell me that the character recalls literally everything that's happened to them in pristine detail? From what characters say, to the actions and expressions that the characters have? You mean to tell me that they remember all of that detail? And I know that's really not fair to that style. It really isn't. But I know less. I can't help but think that way. It's something that my brain has always wrestled with ever since I can really remember. I've always had kind of a hard time with first person. The only time that I've really thought first person completely works is if it's like written from like a diary entry, a journal entry, an email, something along those lines, or like a report of some kind. That is when I buy first person writing or having something that's written in first person. That is one reason why I love H.P. Lovecraft so much. I mean, I hate something completely different, but one reason why I love H.P. Lovecraft and his style of horror is because all of his horror just about is written in first person. But it's all done very deliberately with memory, and it's all written very clinically. For example, Mountains of Madness. It's written very clinically from the point of view of a geologist of some kind, and kind of going through there and him coldly recalling, this is what I saw. Very coldly. This is exactly what I saw. This is how I remember it. And that's why I buy it a little bit more. And that's not so much the case here. But that being said, I don't want to completely diss Emmy Sanders' style of writing. She wrote very well. It's just I have a hard time with first person. And I wasn't expecting this story to be first person. Yeah, wasn't expecting that. So about halfway through the book, that is when Ellis and Lucky get together. They finally get together. And it is quite literally explosively over the top. I mean, the two of them end up having sex in the middle of a tornado. How much more over the top can you get in terms of also describing the turbulence of the relationship and the turbulence of who they are versus the turbulence of their situation and the actual physical turbulence of a tornado coming your way? It is gloriously over the top to the point that I actually had to pause the audiobook and laugh a few times because of how over the top it was. You can actually have them revealing their feelings to themselves in the midst of this tornado. In fact, that could have been happening because maybe they think this is their last moments on Earth. Because there's literally a tornado coming straight for you. I could have done without the sex. Could have done without the smut in that particular scene. That being said, though, I do really love the symbolism of the tornado. I do like the symbolism of it. In the very beginning, it is a big scene where Lucky watches Ellis watching this tornado kind of passing by them. It doesn't directly go over them, but it goes past them, and this is when they were a lot younger. And Ellis is just in awe of the fact that Lucky can just stand out there and also be in awe of the force of this tornado. And it kind of goes into that sort of adrenaline chasing element that Lucky has, which sort of drives him into being into taking the job in which he takes. and so it is kind of symbolically fitting that this tornado, this massive thing of destruction, is also the thing that kind of brings them together in that one moment. It's the thing that also makes them realize, oh shit, it really is you, and it's been you, and it has been you forever. And it makes them finally see that it's this mutual love that they have for each other. I love the symbolism of that. I do. I think it's beautifully written. I love symbolism like that. I just could have done without the smut in that particular part. Speaking of smut, the second half of this book is almost purely smut. Right. All of that character stuff that I loved so much about this book and them dancing around each other and some really heavy emotional shit that happens within the first half of this book. The second half of the book, they're together. Oh, they're fucking. Oh, they're fucking big time. And there's sex scene after sex scene after sex scene. And for the record, there is a place for smut. There really is a place for smut in your books. I have all the Game Changer books by Rachel Reed, and there's plenty of fucking smut in those. So I'm not saying that I don't like smut. I don't enjoy it. There's a place for it. There's just an awful lot of it within the second half of this book, and it kind of almost takes precedence over character development. There's so much of it. And that's where I kind of agree with the consensus of the story, that the first half is superior to the second half. And it is in the second half of the book, and this is my least favorite scene in the entire fucking book, and I wish it was cut. I wish it was cut. Because as I said earlier, what I love is that Ellis is very clearly a neurodivergent character who often goes silent. He goes nonverbal throughout several parts of this book. And yet it is never stated outright that he has autism. It's never stated. It's one of those things that we as an audience and the characters understand that this is how Ellis is. We don't need to outwardly say it. We can connect the dots on our own. We have a brain. But there is a scene where Lucky talks to Ellis's mother, and this scene drove me up the wall because it held my hand and thought I wasn't smart enough and treated me like I was a toddler. I like the idea that she really accepts Ellis, or she really accepts the fact that Ellis and Lucky are together. She's very happy that they're together. She knows that they love each other, and she's very happy. And all that's beautiful, and I like all of that. But I hate that she spells everything out about Ellis's autism. Everything. She says it outright, point as blank, plain as day. No inferencing, nothing. Here it is in case you didn't get it. And I'm like, you know this by now. We know this is how Ellis is. The fact that it was left unsaid doesn't mean we don't understand it. And it's one of those cases where I really wish it was left like Shane in the Game Changer series. Because Shane in Heated Rivalry and the other books, Game Changer and now Unrivaled, Shane is clearly autistic. He clearly has a touch of the tism. But it's never outwardly said. It's just something that we as an audience understand through his actions and his deeds. And that the other characters understand, especially Ilya. And I'm like, that's genius! That's awesome! Treat it like that, please. Don't treat it like it's a big deal. Treat it like we have the audience themselves as a brain cell to understand this horse shit. And it's just so irksome because it's because this scene between Lucky and Ellis's mother is toward the end of the book, and I'm like, oh, they were handling it so brilliantly, and then that scene comes up, and I'm like, fuck off. That being said, I do really like Lucky's dad in particular. He doesn't have a big role in this book, but I do like this dynamic a lot. And I think I give Emmy Sanders a lot of props for this, because this easily could have been done a lot less. This could have been done with a lot less nuance, and I love nuance. And that is Lucky's dad doesn't quite understand Lucky and his relationship with Ellis, but he no less accepts it because he loves his son. And I love that dynamic. I not only love that dynamic, I love writing that dynamic. And I think it's a beautiful dynamic. And I think it's a lot more realistic, especially if you're somewhere out west or the southwest and stuff like that, where, being gay isn't exactly welcome. I love the fact that, he doesn't quite understand it. He accepts it. And I respect that. I respect that Emmy Sanders wrote it like that, and I really appreciate it. So my final thoughts on this before we go to break again and have one more thing to talk about. My final thoughts. What this book gets wrong, it gets really wrong. And it's almost comical and over the top at how much it gets it wrong. But by God, what this book gets right, particularly in that wonderful first half, it gets so right. that it's beautiful. It really is. And I do recommend it. I just don't think I liked it as much as what I was hoping. I don't really want to say that I was completely let down by this book or disappointed. I think that might be a little bit better of a term to describe it, because I really did enjoy it. But I wanted more, or I wanted something a little different. I'm so glad that I wrote it, though. You should read it. I absolutely pick it up. Pick up a copy, get it on Audible, listen to it. The audiobook is really good. The voice actors that portray the two main characters do a great job with performing the book. It's just not what I was expecting, and I had a lot of thoughts about it, and I just kind of wanted to share them right here, right now. And I would like to talk about more of these books, because there are tons of these books. There's one series called the Bonfire series. I think her name is Emmy Lane, who wrote it. And I love those books. Or I love the first book. And then the rest of the books kind of fall off the rails. But I love the first book, and I would love to talk about that too, because it's a beautiful relationship that story portrays as well. But that's all I got really to say about this. I don't even want to get into the topic of women writing books. They don't really know how men talk and stuff like that. And there are merits to that opinion, and there aren't at the same time. I think Rachel Reed is a giant red herring when it comes to that. She clearly knows how to write men. She's very good at maybe not describing how men act, but she's very good with dialogue in terms of how men talk to each other. I think that's her greatest strength, for example. And I used to have that opinion on it too. But I don't really want to get into that. I think that deserves to be its own topic in of itself. I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed this book, and I was glad that I read it. Well, we're going to take one more break, and then we're going to talk about our final topic, which has absolutely nothing to do with what we were just talking about. Has absolutely nothing. Next on the docket, we are going to talk about Khartoum, which is a 1966 epic starring Charlton Heston and Laurence Olivier, and I can't wait to talk about this because, by God, this movie had consumed my entire being for the last 2 months since it was finally available for free on YouTube, and I believe that it still is. So we're going to be talking about that as well, and this is definitely a conversation and a topic that is going to go up on the main channel once this live stream is completed. So, we'll be right back, and we'll be discussing that. But until then, we have one more break, and we will be right back. I will see you in just a few minutes. We interrupt your normal broadcast to bring you this brief message. ANP is proud to have become a HistoryFix affiliate. HistoryFix is a streaming service for history nerds like you and me. This includes some of our own productions, such as the uncut and uncensored version of our documentary on the Battle at Remagen, along with our short documentary breaking down the Boston Massacre moment by moment. So head on over using either the link on your screen right now or by scanning the QR code, and save 30% off the annual subscription price by using the promo code 30% off. Thank you, and let's keep history alive. Well, welcome back to our final topic. About time, right? Been rambling on enough. My voice is getting tired. By God. Let's get this done. Well, our final topic, ladies and gentlemen, is a movie that I have discovered that I have fallen in love with, to the point that it's become one of my favorite epics. It really has. We're talking about 1966's Khartoum, starring Charlton Heston, Laurence Olivier, and Richard Jordan. It's still on YouTube for free. I just checked. It's still on YouTube for free. If you have not seen this film, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It really is an amazing movie in the same vein as something like Lawrence of Arabia, Zulu, and 55 Days of Peking. You mix all of those together, you get this film. And while this film may not be the most visually spectacular epic ever made, the script for this film, written by Robert Ardrey, is phenomenal. It is a phenomenal script, and I cannot talk about that enough. 1966. Yeah, sorry. I just had to make sure something was open. And in fact, it is that script and how good it is. It's what, to me, makes this an excellent film. Is that way. Now, when watching this film, I realized, hey, I'd actually seen this before, and I saw this when I was a little kid, but not through Khartoum itself. What I realized was that what I was watching as a kid was an episode of The Time Tunnel, Irwin Allen's show, The Time Tunnel, namely the opening massacre of Colonel Hicks and his private Egyptian army. That episode of The Time Tunnel used a lot of stock footage taken from this film. And so, like, as I was watching this movie, I was like, what the hell? What is this? I feel like I've seen this before. Well, it turns out that was the reason why. A lot of footage from this movie was lifted and then used within that episode of The Time Tunnel. So I thought that was kind of funny. I was like, oh, this is where that came from. Oh. It's kind of like a light bulb kind of going off in my head. It was one of those moments, and it made me smile. I finally found what I was watching. I was like, this isn't what... Because I remember there being aliens, and I remember there being time travel involved somehow. This isn't what I saw. But it is, because it was stock footage. Anyways, I just thought that was kind of funny. I'm very sad to have seen that this movie was a bomb at the box office. Movie cost a little over $6 million to make. Actually, was probably closer to $9 million. It made only $3 million back. So definitely a bomb. When it comes out. But then again, so is 55 Days of Peking. And because that movie, which was made at around the same time as this movie, was 55 Days of Peking, it kind of made epics go by the wayside come the mid-1960s. It really did bring an end to movies really kind of going into the British Empire, with some exceptions, because that was kind of a subgenre of movie there for a while, really kind of made popular by Zulu. Zulu is probably the quintessential one of those. But not only was this kind of the end of an era in terms of epics, but it was also, it brought an end to the era of Ultra Panavision 70. And if you don't know what Ultra Panavision 70 is, that's perfectly fine. We'll discuss it right now. Ultra Panavision 70 was a widescreen anamorphic process that would create this ultra-wide image that could fit 3 standard Academy ratio frames into one image with a super wide aspect ratio of 2:7:6:1. And if you want to watch a movie off the top of your head, if you really want to look it up, that really properly shows the scope of this, look at Ben-Hur. Khartoum was shot with the same process. And it's sad, because I think Ultra Panavision 70 is such a cool film format, and it was deliberately made for big things, epics. And Khartoum uses it nearly perfectly, I must admit. It's very good because it's so wide. It's so good at capturing the emptiness of the desert. Honestly, I think in some scenes it captures that sense of emptiness and grandeur a little bit better than Lawrence of Arabia. Yeah, I mean, that's a hot take. That's certainly a hot take. But I think it did a very good job at that. So essentially what Ultra Panavision is, also there's a lot of split focus diopter shots in this movie, and I love my split focus diopters. Just wanted to point that out there as well. A split focus diopter is essentially what it allows you to do is it allows you to focus on two things at once and kind of cheats deep focus without the need for tons of light and wide apertures and things of that nature. So what it does is you put a piece of glass that kind of covers up half of the frame, and you can have a subject, because of that glass, be focused in the foreground while your primary lens has something focused in the background. And it's an in-camera trick, and you, at that point, get two subjects in focus at the same time without the need to rack focus or shoot something ultra-wide. And Jaws has a couple of famous shots of that. If you're not sure what those are, just type up split focus diopter Jaws, and you'll see what I mean. And this film has a few of those shots in it. I really like it. But Ultra Panavision 70 is really cool because it's using a widescreen format that already was wide. It was using Super Panavision 70, which creates an aspect ratio of 2:1, which is very wide. It's already wide, without the need for anamorphic lenses, right? Because the film itself, I think, is either 5 or 6 perforations tall, but it's a wide frame, so you don't need an anamorphic lens. You can use regular spherical lenses on it, which gives you a superior looking image. It doesn't distort the image like what anamorphic lenses do. That being said, some madman, and I said this in my Varan video, some madman said, what if we put an anamorphic lens on that and you get Ultra Panavision 70 and turns that 2:1 aspect ratio into something like 2:7:6 or 2:7:5:1. Super wide. Super wide. Almost obnoxiously wide. To the point that a lot of directors didn't like using that aspect ratio because it was so wide, they had a hard time directing in it. And yet it's created some of the coolest visuals I've seen in movies. This film, Ben-Hur especially, looks gorgeous in this process. Battle of the Bulge. It's a mad world as a comedy that used this Ultra Panavision 70 format. And it's really unfortunate because it was revived for a little bit because Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight was shot using the Super Panavision 70 lenses, or the Ultra Panavision 70 lenses and film format, which was awesome. I was so excited for that, but yet it's a movie that takes place entirely in one room. No. This really is a format made for the epic. And I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Honestly, it's probably my favorite 70mm format. Fuck IMAX. Fuck IMAX. Ultra Panavision 70 all the way, baby. Anyhow, what's this movie about? Khartoum is essentially about General Charles Chinese Gordon, we'll get into why he's called Chinese later, and his defense of Khartoum from Muhammad Ahmed the Mahdi. And it depicts the trials and the tribulations of both tactically, politically, and morally of defending this city during the siege. It stars Charlton Heston, Laurence Olivier, and Richard Jordan. If you don't know who Richard Jordan is, I know him because he starred as the Doctor in Zombie 2, directed by Lucio Fulci, as well as starring in Robert Wise's The Haunting, which is another one of my favorite horror films. Now, this film has a wonderful spiritual quality behind it that's lacking in a lot of non-Christian epics. You have Charles Gordon, who was a fundamentalist Christian, but he never really belonged to any denomination, but yet he was a fundamentalist Christian. And then you have the Mahdi, who was considered a prophet of Muhammad, and who directly declared a holy war against Egypt. Now, this movie very much so simplifies the modest uprising against the Egyptians. And the real thing is unbelievably complex. There's a lot of racial ideologies going on here. There's a lot of religious clashes. There's a lot of tribal infighting as well that was going on in this area of the Sudan and Egypt and stuff like that. This part of Africa in general, I should say. And it is a very complicated subject to discuss. It kind of beyond the scope of what I'm doing right now. But this movie could have easily have been bogged down in the politics of this whole thing. This is a problem that I actually have with Zulu Dawn, where it almost gets a little too bogged down in the politics of the whole thing while not doing the politics justice. And that could have easily have happened here. But the scriptwriter made the very wise decision of choosing to focus solely on the siege of Khartoum itself, very similar to how the film Zulu focused exclusively not so much on the Zulu War itself, but solely on Rourke's drift. And that's all. And that's something I appreciate it. Because I can appreciate a movie that is like so focused. That is so unbelievably focused. Because you can get to the nitty-gritty of this one element. And you can really focus on character. You can really focus on things like that. And that's exactly what this movie does. And that's one reason why I applaud it. And another thing that I really applaud of this movie, and this is certainly something that separates it from, let's say, 55 Days of Peking, which is about the Boxer Rebellion over in China. 55 Days of Peking does not depict the Chinese in a very respectful way. Asian face aside. Asian face aside. They pretty much are the bad guys, and they are depicted as the bad guys, and they are depicted as evil. No ifs, ands, or buts. And the Europeans are depicted as the good guys, the saviors, the moral Christians going up against the pagan horde, as it were. Nah. Khartoum actually does a magnificent job of depicting the Mahdi forces, the rebels, not as these faceless bad guys. And I can smell the Zulu influence on the movie through that. It plays the modest forces with a shocking amount of respect. There's this great scene at the beginning of the movie, and I love this entire scene that takes place in... It takes place in London. This scene is wonderful, but there's a great scene where Colonel Stewart, that's Richard Jordan's character, is explaining to Prime Minister Gladstone what's going on over there. Because Gladstone has just discovered that Colonel Hicks, this is the beginning of the movie, that Colonel Hicks was defeated. Not just defeated, massacred by modest forces. Him and his private Egyptian army were completely slaughtered by the modest forces. And Stewart explains it as this. He says, and I'm quoting here, he says, Hicks and his men were fighting for wages. The Mahdi and his men are fighting a holy war. The Mahdi is the most extraordinary man the Sudan has ever seen, and he knows his people. And I love that. That immediately paints the Mahdi not as just the antagonistic force of the story, but it gives him a sense of respect that I think does the history of itself justice, which I think that's what this movie does unbelievably well. Is there are loads of inaccuracies in this film. Stuff that didn't happen, anachronisms aside. There's stuff in this that did not happen in reality. Sure, there's plenty of that. It's the same way with Zulu, for the record. In fact, I would argue that this movie is slightly more accurate than the movie Zulu. But it no less pays respect to the history itself. And while maybe not as nuanced as something modern, something that probably would have been made today, it still gives that a sense of gravity. And also because it plays the Mahdi forces with respect and doesn't make them just mindless automatons that we need to kill, it makes them more intimidating. And again, that's I believe that Zulu influence that is all over this film. Anyways, I just adore that scene. And there's also this big battle sequence with Gordon in the middle of the film that I really want to highlight. Because despite the fact that Gordon wasn't actually in the midst of this battle, he was in Khartoum, which is where he needed to be because he was the Governor General of the Sudan at this point. Gordon, in the movie, leads this battle. And what I liked about it is that it showed the force, both armies having a semblance of a brain in their head. Both of them. And I really liked, I mean, it's not the best battle scene ever made, but I liked this element. The tactics Gordon used, and then the adaptation of the modest forces once they catch on that this is what Gordon is doing. And I like it. It felt actually like two armies fighting each other and not just mindless Hollywood trash. Granted, it has a lot of blue screen in it with Charlton Heston, and it's really blatantly obvious, and it's not very good filmmaking, quite frankly. In fact, that blue screen issue is one of the film's biggest problems, but we'll get into that a little bit. Actually, we'll get into it right now. This is the section right here. Laurence Olivier was never actually in Egypt, which is where a majority of this movie was shot. He was over in Pinewood Studios over in England, and it is very obvious that he was over in Pinewood Studio, because when it cuts to the outdoor shots and then it cuts to shots of the Mahdi, or him dressed up as the Mahdi, yes, in blackface, it does not match. It does not match. And that is unfortunate. And it is a problem that plagues several scenes, not just with him, but also with Charlton Heston in many scenes, even though Heston was actually in Egypt for several scenes as well. But there are some where he's not, and it's so obvious when he's not. And it is a bit distracting. Not quite as distracting as Laurence Olivier in blackface. That is a blaring problem with this movie that some people just won't be able to shake. In fact, it's not just him. Several actors are in blackface, including the man who played King Polias in Jason and the Argonauts. Yes, he is in blackface in this movie. And it really dates the film. It really shows the difference between the ideology of making films back then versus the ideology that we have today. But that being said, I don't think this is done to be disrespectful to anyone in particular, or done with malice. It's just a difference of cultural morality that we saw within the 60s versus what we see in the 2020s today. And the reason why I say that is because the actors don't insult the historical characters they're playing. They play them as people, not just mindless brutes. Especially Laurence Olivier. Laurence Olivier gives so much interesting nuance to the Mahdi throughout this entire movie. And he's not in it very much. He's only in a few scenes, but yet his presence, it's so good. I love the fact that his presence is there from beginning to end. You just feel it dangling over you, and it's wonderfully handled. It's just more of a sign of the times more than racial intentions or things like that. And I'll applaud it. It's pretty accurate to what happened. It's all pretty accurate to what's happened. Much of the strategy shown was properly depicted, if simplified. It was properly depicted, along with Gordon's backstory itself. It does kind of explain his escapades in China, earning him great respect in his nickname, Chinese Gordon. It also kind of shows his escapades and the consequences of his escapades in the Sudan before the events of this movie. Most notably, how he ended the slave trade in this region. And from what I read, people in the Sudan really liked him for the most part. Not everybody, but for the most part, a lot of people in the Sudan really liked Gordon. It's one reason why they cheered him when he arrived, was because he ended the slave trade in this part of the world. So he was genuinely liked and respected as a man, both historically and shown within the film, as well as back over in Britain. He was a hero over in Britain. And his portrayal, he's portrayed as a very mild-tempered man. In reality, he was a mild-tempered man. He was a very soft-spoken man, very opinionated. And again, he used a lot of his Christian values in his everyday thinking. In reality, it's kind of a mixed bag, because toward the end of the siege, apparently he kind of went mad in Khartoum, kind of was going crazy, and it almost was like, from what I've read, it's almost like Gordon kind of accepted the fact that he was going to become a new Christian martyr. He knew he was going to die here in this siege. He knew he was going to die, and he started playing up that Christian element, and he really wanted to be remembered as a Christian martyr. And that's exactly what happened, historically. That is exactly what happened. It's actually very similar to what happened during the Anglo-Zulu War. That suddenly there was this horrible disaster, the Battle of Isandlwana, and it angers the British people into launching a larger scale war against the Zulus. And we got the second invasion of the Anglo-Zulu War because of it. In this case, we have the Siege of Khartoum. Khartoum is slaughtered. They try to get a lot of civilians out of there. It doesn't really go very well. It's an entirely complicated story. But the forces defending Khartoum are slaughtered by the Mahdi rebels. And this really angers a lot of people in Great Britain, to that they launch a full-scale war against the Mahdist forces. And while the Zulu War, that is what happened, it ended the Disraeli government over in London. This situation ended the Gladstone government. In fact, I believe the Gladstone government came out of the debacle that happened in South Africa with the Zulu invasion into Isandlwana and stuff like that. And now this is what brings down that government. So the parallels are unmistakable. They're there. I also like this movie because, for the most part, it uses accurate guns. Oh my god, I hate this. It uses accurate guns. The most prominent one that I notice is the Remington rolling block rifles, which I didn't even know was a fucking thing before I watched this movie. And I like seeing them in this movie because they're really cool and unique guns. But apparently they were given a lot to foreign armies and stuff like that throughout the British Empire. They're not quite as good as the Martini Henrys, the famous Martini Henrys, nor the upcoming Lee Enfields. The Lee Enfield MK1s were just a little under a decade away at this point. But they're still really good. They're really interesting because they're breech loaders, and they kind of have like a revolving barrel, or like they're hard. They're very unique guns. They're not breech loading in the way of like the Martini Henry, though. They're very interesting. Also, I love the use of the multi-barreled Nordenfelt gun. I think that's how you pronounce it. I've seen this thing a few times. But I think those things are so ridiculous looking that suddenly I see one in this movie and I go, oh, ha, it's one of those. That was a really interesting gun. And it also uses a lot of the British Armstrong field cannons, which for some reason this movie has those cannons. You fire them with a torch. That's not the case at all. They are breech-loading cannons. You see them using breaches in the movie. You see the breach. In fact, there's one scene during the final battle where you actually have somebody take the breach out. You see him literally take the breach out of the gun, disabling it. That way, the Mahdist forces can't use the gun. So I'm not sure why they're depicted often with torches firing them. I'm not sure. That's my biggest complaint in terms of the guns in this film, is I don't understand why they had that. But this film also has proper British uniforms. I am shocked that they actually use proper British uniforms, because a lot of films at this time would have done the redcoats. But in reality, come the mid-1880s, the redcoats at this point were largely done away with and replaced with the khaki uniforms that we kind of know about of this time period, of the ones that we'd see later on in the Boer Wars and stuff like that. Even in World War I, they had that khaki uniform. The redcoats weren't really there. Again, not entirely. There are exceptions. In fact, I think the last battle to ever use the red jackets was in this Mahdi rebellion, just a couple years after the Siege of Khartoum ended, if I remember reading that correctly. But there's movies like The Four Feathers in 2004, which depicts around this time period in Africa, and depicts a battle that took place around there. And that movie uses the red tunics. It uses the red jackets because of the red coats. When in reality, they would have been wearing khaki. They wouldn't have been wearing those red. And it was a deliberate decision because they thought the red looked more prominent against the desert, blah, 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 blah. They thought it was more famous. That's just a stupid Hollywoodization. Just use the normal uniforms, and that is what this movie does, and I applaud it for doing just that. Charlton Heston is fantastic in this movie. He is so good. Granted, he's just about good in everything that he does, even his bad movies, but it's a very understated role for him, playing Chinese Gordon. And it is confirmed that, he saw this movie as being one of his best performances. And I agree, it is one. It's one that he was very proud that he starred in this movie. And it is really good because it's not him being the larger than life character per se. It's him being it is him being a larger than life character don't get me wrong, because that's who Chinese Gordon was. But he's just not big about it. He's very understated throughout this entire movie, and I love that. I really genuinely like that, and he does a great job. Apparently, he didn't really care for the director. Granted, he always had strong opinions about his directors. For example, he didn't really like... he liked William Wyler, but he thought William Wyler was the wrong director for Ben-Hur. He thought Anthony Mann was the wrong director for El Cid. He thought they should have been inverted, blah, blah, blah. He's always had strong opinions about his directors. And he thought the director of Khartoum, while not a bad director, he never says that the director is bad. He just thinks he wasn't the best fit for this movie. And a part of me kind of agrees to an extent that this movie needed a different director. But he thought this movie was handled, in the end, pretty well. He loved what he was seeing. He liked the final product. And Heston was very sad to see that this movie bombed. And I don't blame him. He considered this one of his best performances, and I agree. I think this is truly one of Charlton Heston's best performances. Now, this film was directed by a guy named Basil Dearden. And it was very clear that the producers of this movie wanted to make something visually akin to Lawrence of Arabia, with the action of 55 Days in Peking. The problem is that Basil Dearden is no David Lean. He is no David Lean. He's not a bad director, as I said earlier. He's not a bad director in every way. Granted, I haven't seen many of his movies. I think I've only seen one other of his movies. But he's not an overly visual director either. In fact, he's a little bit more visually driven than someone like Andrew V. McLaughlin, who was one of those journeyman directors who directed a lot of westerns with John Wayne. He directed a lot of war films, such as The Wild Geese, for example. The Devil's Brigade is another war movie in which he directed. I directed the TV miniseries The Blue and the Gray, which is one of my favorite TV miniseries of all time. So he's not a bad director, but I think Basil Dearden does have a little more of an artistic eye than Andrew V. McLaughlin, but not much more. Basil Dearden, the only other movie that I saw directed by him was a film called Victim, which is a phenomenal movie. It was one of the first movies to discuss homosexuality openly, made in England. And it is handled extremely well. It's a wonderful movie. And it seems to me, looking at his filmography, and while I haven't seen any other of his films, I kind of looked them up to see what kind of films they were. It seems like he was really good at making personal movies that are character-driven. And because of that, it makes sense why the producers went with him to handle this movie, because the script, when reading it, is a very character-driven, a very good character study of both the Mahdi and Gordon himself. And those are actually the best moments in this movie, in my humble opinion, are the moments between characters. I love the growing relationship of Gordon and Stewart. I love their friendship that kind of blossoms. At first, they're kind of begrudgingly working together, and by the end, they're pretty close, and they have a lot of respect for each other. I love that. But I think it is best portrayed in every scene in which Gordon and the Mahdi talk to each other. The scenes with those two are written within an inch of their life. And it has one of my favorite quotes in any movie ever in it. And that is, Gordon realizes that he's going to die. He's been shown that the evacuation force of a lot of the European people, they were slaughtered by Mahdi forces. He looks up, and instead of being completely afraid, he looks at the Mahdi in the eye and he says, "I may die of your miracle. You will surely die of mine." Ultimately, that's kind of what happened to the Mahdi. The Mahdi did not live too much longer after the siege of Khartoum ended. In fact, I would argue that the Mahdi dying so early is one reason why the Mahdi uprising kind of petered out and fell apart as quickly as it did once the British started arriving in force again, is they didn't have that unifying force behind them anymore. So while those scenes are the most historically inaccurate parts of the movies, because in reality, Gordon never met the Mahdi face-to-face at all. However, I respect the creative decision of having them meeting face-to-face because it's very dramatic. And what is discussed in the scenes when they meet face-to-face is what they actually discussed in real life. It was just, in reality, it wasn't done face-to-face. It was done through a series of letters dispatched to one another. Now, that wouldn't be as entertaining, right, to show on screen letters and stuff like that, so they had them meet face-to-face. This is the scenes where they discuss are often what they discussed in those letters. So I don't blame the director and the writer for making this decision of having them meet face-to-face. And at least what they're discussing in those scenes are what they discussed in real life, just with letters, not face-to-face. So it's one of those decisions that I kind of really applaud. Now, the battle scenes in this film are directed by a guy named Yakima Kanut, who is the greatest stunt coordinator of all time. I don't care what anyone says. Yakima Kanut is one of the is the greatest stunt coordinator of all time. Certainly the best second unit director I can think of. Let me list a couple of these movies that he worked on. Old Yeller, Ben-Hur, El Cid, Where Eagles Dare, Anthony and Cleopatra, Fall of the Roman Empire. All of those movies with some amazing action in them, he coordinated and he directed. For example, he was the coordinator. I don't think he was technically the director of it, but he was certainly the coordinator of the chariot race scene from Ben-Hur, which is widely considered one of, if not the greatest action set pieces of all time. And I agree. It's a phenomenal sequence, especially now that I got to see it in IMAX. Oh, amazing. And I just wanted to give him a shout out because Yakima Kanut is awesome and his work is all over this movie. Some of the stunts that you see within the film are phenomenal. They are great. The battle scenes in this movie are actually just fantastic. I love them. And they are handled very well. I could have used a little more violence in them, but again, this had to be a PG movie. So certainly one of the best second unit directors I've ever known. I just wanted to give him a shout out. Also, the soundtrack for this movie is made by somebody named Frank Cordell. Frank Cordell is another one of those people, but just like the director Dearden, or whatever his name is. I don't really know any of his filmography. The only other movie in which Frank Cordell composed that I know of is the film Cromwell. And this is a much better movie than Cromwell, as much as I like that film too. Much more, even I'd argue this movie is also more accurate than Cromwell. That is a great score. This is a stunning score. The music by Frank Cordell for Khartoum is one of the highlights of the movie. It's phenomenal. It is phenomenal. It does everything that an epic score is supposed to be. It's rousing, it's moving, it's motivating, and it's big. It's big. I mean, granted, there's no topping the epic scores of Miklos Rozsa. I mean, you just can't top that man, but it's a phenomenal score. I love listening to it. Wolseley's March in this film is definitely an earworm, and it gets stuck in my head all the time, and you'll hear me whistling it all the time. It's a great score. It is truly a great score, and unfortunately, it's just not available. Unfortunately, the score isn't available in stereo. A re-recording is available in stereo, but it's not the full score. If you want the full score, the only way you can get it, unfortunately, is a mono CD. So it's not the full scale of the score, but at least we have it in mono. So you can listen to it, and I do have that CD. I like the movie so much, I actually have the CD. Can't recommend it enough. I just thought that was really good. Anyway, so that's going to wrap that up. So overall, my final thoughts on Khartoum, a total surprise. I thought this was going to be a far more generic film. I thought this was just going to be kind of like a boring epic, a little bit more in the lines of Battle of the Bulge, where it's not very historically accurate. It's more whatever, and it's just kind of not a terrible movie. It's just kind of a bare basic movie that happens to have a bigger scale than a majority of the films of this nature. No. Unbelievably smart movie, unbelievably character-driven, and a wonderful script. And I'll argue that. I think the script is the best part of this film, and I can't recommend it enough. Again, it is on YouTube currently for free in its original 2:7:6:1 aspect ratio. Highly recommend it. And in the very least, it's got me really interested in this period of British history. I could have cared less about the Sudan, 2 months ago, but now suddenly I'm reading a lot about it, and I'm reading a lot of the rescue elements that were happening about it. I'm reading one right now, which involves, I believe, what was the guy's name? I have to look this up. Guys. Because I need to talk about this. Let's see. It is a wild story. It is fucking nuts. Yes. Let's see. This was the Jameson Affair. Which was in 1888. This movie introduced me to that because it led me down a bit of a rabbit hole of stuff that was going on in like the Congo and this area of Africa at the time. Holy fuck. If that isn't the definition of a true horror story, I don't know what is. You want a hell of a story, you look up the Jameson Affair. And, this movie kind of introduced me to it. So it's kind of interesting what rabbit holes could lead you to. But, in fact, it's to the point that I'm thinking about making a video about the Jameson Affair. It's fucking nuts. Anyways, highly recommend this movie. It's not perfect, don't get me wrong. It's certainly a lot of epics were made better than this movie. But still cannot recommend it enough. Great music, great acting, some fine action, some really bad compositing. Very good movie. And it's led me to learn a lot more history about this subject, and I wish I could talk about it more here, but I haven't had time to do the proper research for it, and I just wanted to talk about it. Well, that's going to conclude this, ladies and gentlemen. That's going to conclude all of this. Thank you very, very, very much for tuning in. This is a bit different, but thank you very much for tuning in. You'll find all of our social media is available in the description below. Again, this was originally aired, this here was aired on ANP TV. ANP Television is the variety channel where we discuss about anything and everything and whatever. Essentially what AN Productions used to be, the main channel used to be, while AN Productions is now exclusively history-related content, film history, military history, and history in general. And the variety is definitely what this live stream was. There was nothing combining the three subjects in which I discussed today together, other than the fact that they are three things that are big defining elements of my life. And that is Kaiju, gay shit, history. There's, oh man, what a crazy thing. Anyways, that concludes this concludes the July edition of the ANP monthly live streams. Thank you very, very, very much for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button for more. You'll be supporting us a great deal. Become an ANP team member on my main channel very cheaply. Very cheap. You're going to be seeing more exclusive content on there. That is what I'm going to start doing. I'm going to really start hitting that up. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. Take care.